I've got a cross-cut spalting maple pen blank here. I'm really excited to turn this down. I've only turned down one other piece of cross-cut, and it definitely is challenging, but it's a lot of fun, so let's get started. I'm going to knock off the corners on the disc sander, because that's kind of a risky part on the lathe. It's a lot easier if I take some of that down with sandpaper. Alright, I've got the corners knocked off. I know it's not the best job, but anything helps. And I know I definitely need a new sanding disc. It's really starting to burn it, but that's not a problem either. We made these bushings ourselves, but whenever we drilled the hole, I was using a different mandrel, and the hole is actually a little bit oversized. So just taking a piece of paper and putting it in there makes it fit just perfect. I have another set of bushings on order on the way here. That's also because the edges here are starting to get a little bit too small. This crosscut stuff is definitely very hard to turn. Even like you can see, you got tear out right there, and everywhere around here. It's a very challenging wood to turn, so I'm gonna leave a lot of wood that I'm gonna sand. I can keep going, but a lot of it's gonna be sanding because sandpaper won't let it tear out. Whenever I'm turning this crosscut, I have high speed and I'm doing light passes. Believe it or not, this is about as far as I'm going to go with my tool, and I'm going to try to take everything else down with sandpaper. I've done this before. I took it down farther than this, and it chipped out. And I really don't want it to chip out. It went all the way down to the brass tube. I was able to glue it back on. It was very hard to notice, but I'm going to take my time and take this with sandpaper, and I think it'll really pay off in the end. We always want to take out the tool rest before we start sanding. Now that I'm starting to get this sanded, you can really see the cool crane pattern. That spalting is amazing. If you take a look here, you can see this is getting close to that brass bushing, but whenever I move it, it moves far away from the brass bushing. That's the only way I know how to fix that would be with a tool or like a power sander. I'm just going to take the skew here, not the skew, the gouge, and try to get that concentric again. Alright, that's much better. Yeah, that'll do. There's only a little bit of chip out here. That's fine. That's sandable. So let's continue sanding. I'm taking a strip of sandpaper, and I'm also just doing this by hand to take down the high spots. I don't want to do it too much by hand because I don't want to make it not a circle anymore, but that is helping. I'm now doing a little bit of hand sanding just to get it right down to the bushing. Normally I don't have much of a problem as this. I normally would take it down pretty close with the tool, but since I'm doing more sanding, I think the sand will kind of let it go off center like that and kind of keep sanding. So I'm going through and taking off the high spots. You can see I'm getting pretty close to the bushing now, so the sandpaper is really helping. Now that I've got the coarse stuff out of the way, I'm going to go ahead and sand it with 400, and it's no problem if I turn the lathe on. Now I'm going to take the 400 and also sand it by hand. One thing that I have to be, I think I see what's going on as well. Whenever I'm sanding, I think it takes some of the black from the spalting and puts it into the maple. It's going to be a little tricky, but I think I just kind of have to separate them the best that I can. One thing I just discovered is these gray spots is really just super soft wood. It's very soft, and it really, I guess maybe it likes to absorb color. Maybe some of that will go away when I put the finish on, maybe not, we'll see. I have this sanded to 600 grit, and that's good enough. It still has these little gray spots. I'm not sure if they're going to go away whenever I put the CA finish on it. It's not a big deal if they don't. I think I'm just going to deal with it. I think you probably won't even notice it with all the really cool pattern in the wood. So I'm going to turn on the lathe and put the CA finish on. Remember those gray patches? They kind of went away a little bit. They darkened up, but really that looks like it's part of the wood. Maybe it is. I really like how that turned out, actually. Not to mention the spalting pattern in the wood is just amazing. When I was turning this, I learned that CA glue does not dry very well when it's cold out, and where I have the lathe, there's no heat, and it is kind of the middle of winter. It gets pretty cold in here, so I had to take it off the lathe and bring it inside. Whenever it cures in the cold, it makes these weird ridges, and if you look here, I thought that white was gonna go away, but I think it's gonna stay. It's not a big deal. I mean, this is just like a pen for me, just because I'm learning a lot on this pen. But I'm gonna go ahead and flatten this down with some 400 grit. Now I've got my 400 grit finish. Now I'm gonna move up to 600. With the 600 grit, you can really start to see the shine come out on the piece. Now I'm going to hit it with some 1200. Alright, so that is a 1200 grit finish. It's very smooth, but to go one more step, I'm going to take it to the buffer. Alright, that finish looks great on the CA, and this buffing wheel we probably got at Harbor Freight for about $6. I really like it. I use it for everything. It's really nice to have it. Take off the bushings. What I do is I just tap them, and then a lot of times they pop right off because that CA glue is holding them on just on the outer layer. So a little tap breaks them right off. For this wood, I'm going to use a black enamel executive pen kit. I got this off Penn State. Might have been $5 or $6, and I really am happy with how the executive pen kits turn out. Now I'm going to press the tip on. Now I'll drop in the pen refill. Now we'll screw in the twist mechanism. Now I'll press the back cap on. And it's almost done. I'm just going to take a rag and wipe off the sawdust that I got on the black. Alright, so here it is finished. I wiped off all those pieces, got the sawdust off, and this grain pattern really is fascinating. The spalting pattern is, it's probably one of my favorite pens. The crosscut gives the grain just a really cool pattern, and the CA glue really helps stabilize the really soft wood. This is very soft since it's crosscut and because it's spalting. I gotta say, this is beautiful.